Well, hello there. This is Jonathan Alvin, Game Master J, and this is the Game Master Soapbox. It's my daily conversation with you, the players and the game masters and general public who is interested in, or at least is taking the time to look into role-play games. As usual, I have a series of categories of conversation I wish to go over with you. They're listed here on this page, and I will go through them one by one. And each of them will be broken by a bit of a pause as I set up each one of them for later use in other purposes. But we're going to today we're going to talk about the 3 signs of good game mechanics, the concept of paid game mastery, whether it's a necessity or a nuisance. We're also going to talk about the difference between consistent and routine. My slider got messed up on that one. Let me get it fixed. There we go. We're also going to talk about the keys to running a one-shot and what that specifically means. My rant for the day is going to talk about coin-based hijinks that occur during a game or game series and what that can actually do to the game world economy. It's quite revealing in a lot of ways to think about how fiduciary our mentality is when we're playing a game and how easy it is to slip out of the concept of a different world and role-playing in that one, and instead shifting over and playing as mercenary as if this world was that world. But we'll get into that more in a minute. And then finally, we're going to continue to stump for the Nycos Twitch RPG experiment and also the Start Playing websites events that will be coming up on Saturday and how they are linked and associated. So before we get going, I want to remind you that we are sponsored by Board Game Paradise. That's their logo right down there in the corner. And they are located in Redlands, California. And they are open 7 days a week and carry every style of card game, board game, miniature game, role-play game. Just about every title you can think of. And are a full-service store. So if you are looking for opportunities to play role-play games in person and you happen to be in the Southern California area, I run games on Mondays and Tuesdays at Board Game Paradise between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. Mondays and Tuesdays. So won't you stop by and check it out next time you're in town. The reason why I'm doing these videos, some people have asked, and the core reason is that for 50 years, or very, very, very near that, if not that many so far, but thereabouts, I have been both passionately, personally, and professionally involved in the games business, both in the board and card games arenas and in the role-play arena. And in particular, I've been a storyteller for Dungeons and Dragons for the better part of 50 years. And in that process, I've seen a lot of games systems come and go, and people switch up and try different ones, and then shift back perhaps the ones that they played before or new iterations of them, and so on. And so this has led me to an understanding that there is a variety of good game mechanics, and it is arguable that every single game system out there has probably one or more of its really core ideas that are clever enough to be included in a countdown of all the best options in role-play games. But the 3 signs that I use for determining a good game mechanics are the following. Number 1 sign of a good game mechanic is ease of use. In other words, if the terminology around the game mechanics specifically is easy to understand and the call out of that specific action will immediately render a quick understanding of what it is you're supposed to do. That's a good game mechanic because you don't have to do a lot of mental gymnastics. Pardon me. To make things work properly, you have to just simply think about it, and the thought process will lead you to the correct decisions. So an example of a good game mechanic would be the idea that a player, when they've made a mistake, has the opportunity to correct it by some form of near basic average chances to repair the glitch, fix the problem, and repair whatever was a mistake. We don't have to create a jungle gym of technicalities. If somebody simply made a mistake, there should be a way to reverse it quickly. And good game mechanics are built so that they're easy to pick up and easy to transfer. Second of the three signs of a good game mechanic would be the intuition necessary to enact it is almost obvious. The idea in any role-playing game that your duties in the game are to move the character, to enact actions as the character, and to cause physical or mental injury within the game. Those are all obviously good game mechanics to have included, or good game points. Now, the execution of them can vary wildly from something really simple, like on a 1 or 2, the dice does this effect. On the 3 or 4, the dice does this second effect. And 4, 5, 6, it does something else. These simple mechanics make for smoother play. The more you have to think about what is going on, the more you have to internalize the individual actions before you can utilize them, the less interesting and the less useful the game mechanic aspect is. So make sure that when you're looking at a game mechanic, you're looking at whether or not it's adding benefit to the game simply by using it, or if it emulates something that already exists that the players can grab a hold of. And these are reasons to use these game mechanics. Now, the third sign of a good game mechanic is that it's able to be described in a sentence or two. The more that you have to talk about a dice mechanism, the less likely it is to be a good dice mechanism. As we think about how a game progresses, we need to take a hold of the elements of that situation and be able to parse them down as quickly as possible, as concisely as we can, and in the process, therefore, give a discriminating response that leads to a decision. So when we talk about a good game mechanic, therefore, you're talking about something that's simple, that's intuitive, easy to explain, and quick to apply. That's what it takes. All right. Now, this next point, I'm probably going to get some trouble. If you want to post to me your response to this part, I'd greatly appreciate it. In the realm of played game mastery, do you consider it to be a coming necessity for a play, or is it an unhealthy nuisance? I've been on both sides of the fence for a long time, and I've been on the for pay side of the line for a while, and there's a reason why we listed as a possible choice to actually choose that it should exist or not exist. That seems rather extreme because there's so many places where it may be okay for a time period, but not necessarily for all of time. So, but here's my justifications for paid game mastery and why I do feel that it is a necessity. Number one, as the world continues to progress, there are more and more people that want to have a favorable game experience within the role play element because there is simply less interaction of a role play nature between actual people in the real world. That sounds maybe deep, but the point is that people who are unpaid game masters who are put under the kind of pressure that a game master can fall under to perform in terms of getting new story content out is running a risk of being ignored. So the person who is taking the position that paid game masters is important is saying that we need to show the value of games mastery, because if we don't, the games masters will go away, because the amount of work necessary puts them in a position of doing something distasteful or unfun, and doing that without any compensation or response on the basis of congratulations or awareness is a bad thing. And our world has gotten to the point where we are fundamentally unapologetic. We don't know how to acknowledge the things that we do that are wrong, and we certainly don't know how to accept the things that others have done that are right. And so convincing a game master to play is really tantamount, if you will, to telling them that they're valued, and our culture doesn't do that. So a paid games mastery, people who are being paid by the process of players who are professional, is far greater. It's so much more useful than the amateur process that is catch as catch can, and you don't know what you're going to get from the game masters. So to be fair, the concept of a paid games mastery can lead to a nuisance, particularly when you have a limited communication area. One player is willing to do the work and broadcast it, and others are willing to do the work but don't know how to advertise. This leads to, therefore, an imbalance. The person who has the skill kind of gets the grease, and so it seems unfair that the person who is most valued in the game is also one that's getting compensated. But if you think about it, it makes sense, because a person who is willing to take the effort to produce a product that is a role-playing game environment is doing so at his own risk, because the universe he's creating still has the limits of what the storyteller is going to bring to the table. So now the next thing we're going to talk about is the difference between consistent and routine. And I kind of, in a way, feel like I evidence this every day with this show, because if I show up every day and I create content and I provide that information to you, I am becoming a consistent resource. On the other hand, if I ever reproduce the same resource in a different timeline and hold that specific, see, I did it again. There's something that's going on, and I'm not sure what it is in my mind, and I've noticed it a couple of times in the last month or so. So if I'm talking and you're watching and you feel like I'm slipping like I just did, please call out and let me know that it's going on, because it's probably a matter of a squirrel. I have a lot that's in my mind, but a lot of pieces don't necessarily fit into the direction of the conversation that I'm having, and so I sometimes will switch gears and not realize that I slipped out of gear. So but there is a difference between creating consistent information and data and routinely broadcasting, because a routine broadcaster may repeat information week over week because he's just so used to doing the video and the audio that he doesn't think about whether or not it has constant value or useless value to the player or to the watcher. And this is true when you're running an adventure game. If you are telling a story, but it's the same story you told last week and the week before that and the week before that and the month before that, then you are running absolutely a routine game. But is it building anywhere for the players? If you've got a process where the player can proceed and learn from and change their actions on the basis of what they're doing in the real world or in the meta world or whatever, then you're said it again. Right there. I did the same thing. I've got to figure out what's causing that. That's frightening to me that I can drift right at that moment. So the difference between consistent and routine has to do with the fact that routine is consistently doing it without focusing on the content, and the other is to be constantly creating new information, which seems to be routine because it's period over period, but the elements and the information is different. So there you go. So when we talk about running a one-shot, what we are referring to is a game session of between 3 and 5 hours of duration for the most part, and one in particular that does not link either by word or deed to the actions of a group over a longer period. So if you are running a game and that game only is going to last for 1 or 2 weeks, and then you're going to be shutting it down, turning off the channel and doing something else and letting somebody else run the game and whatever, then you're not running a campaign. And it's maybe I could actually turn this into a rant, but I'm not going to. But the very idea that a player has a concept or an idea that they want to run that's short duration and can be done in 1 or 2 sessions, this is what running a one-shot means. And it's actually, in my way of thinking, it's much more difficult than you think, because the longer you create and develop the character for your story, the more that could be added, because there's always additional impressions, data that comes to us from our children and other places where we've had experiences that give us those new inputs. So running a one-shot is different from running a campaign, because the characters are narrowly defined for that specific moment in time that they are being played, and may or may not ever find another place to interact with the world. It's a scary place to be, but it's also kind of a challenging place to be, because there are card and map purposes that are specific to the one shot that won't carry forward, and likewise there's pieces that might be carried forward that don't have anything to do with the story at hand. So realizing that the one shot is a one shot, do remember that you're running and creating for a pattern and a peoples that are narrowly defined. The second thing that's a key to running a one-shot is that you have a compelling concept of what the actual element of the event will be. In other words, is it a locational based thing where you are only stuck in a specific location, or is it a tidal based that moves you around in the world and ebbs and flows? Is it a paid gig where the person that is paying the money knows how much time you have to find whatever and therefore counts it off and pays you immediately? These are all up to the game master, and all of them are equally valid. In the case of building a long-term story, I prefer the most simple, and that is the most straightforward, which is an NPC who provides a story, and for a small cash prize provides the players with some of the effects and events that they will need in order to accomplish said one shot. Third element of creating a one shot that really matters is to have a clear idea of where the beginning, middle, and end is, because you have to find a way to transition, and sometimes you have to force that transition because the players have endeavored a way to change the focus of the entire encounter and make it less palatable to be a storyteller, the less palatable to be a trader in that specific instance, and therefore harder to get the information that you need to make the activities of the game work properly. And the final thing to say about running a one-shot is that you have to be willing to say we're done when you're done, and we're done cannot be when you're playing. If you're failing a game and you are running a one-shot, and you're not finishing them, then that's a problem. So you need to figure out how to begin, middle, and end your encounter. Best way is to come up with a short story where you can actually write it and have it play to its fruition in 3 spaces during a game. One of the great ones I did for this is a campaign I did some time ago, wherein the premise of the story was in the prologue and the information that I shared. The history point I was focusing on was an actual occurrence where a large amount of gold and silver disappeared on board a steamship that eventually sank, and therefore there was a murder mystery and a story of a soldier that was among screens and this kind of thing. And the beauty of it is that there are ways to leverage those questions so they become actually tentative teases and quotes to others in the facility, and therefore they can pick it out and choose the answer and play the game with you. So all right, so I'm going to get off of the one shot because the one shots are really microcosmic. They are the smallest portion of the games community and arguably one of the easiest to handle. So let's talk a little bit about coin-based hijinks. In a certain place, in a certain kingdom, there was a machine that was built that the players could produce really fancy silver and copper coins by putting raw silver and copper into the machine. But the person who administered the machine became aware of this and actually leveraged it by learning how to change the keywords so there was more than one. Well, this coin-based hijink is that they would buy at one price and sell at another price and move the product within the machine so the money never was able to be spent anywhere. And the funny part of it was that the conversation led to the players being selfish of one another and disliking the other players, even though the other players told them everything that was known about their people. So this Coinbase hijinks, this money-changing monster, leads to problems in the game world economy if and only if the players are in a world that is enduring week over week, so that if a person has pumped 1,000 gold pieces into the local economy on a Saturday, then is the game broken still for those in the local area on the following Tuesday? Well, game mechanics, because they are what they are, not necessarily a big deal of pursuing, but it does tend to leave problems for the person who is playing the game, because he is having to redefine everything on a weekly basis because money's value keeps dropping and the items that he owns keep shifting, and it just becomes a real burden to playing. And I can't stand it when there's a change up in the system because a player has determined they're going to hold the coins to a certain time and then they're going to ship them, and then want me as the game master to calculate what the change in the rate of their return is moment over moment, as the system seems to be doing, so that they can understand. So it's just you've got to have a handle on what's going on within your game, and you've got to be able to clamp down on the coin-based rigmarole of swapping out gold for electum, for silver, for platinum, and trying to bank the system or market the system, because it's a role play game, guys. It's just a fun conversation, and the pieces are not, lasting solid actual gold and things like that. So I'm going to get off the subject now, because I probably didn't talk too clearly about it. I don't know why this has been kind of a train wreck of a show, and I don't know. Anyway, so let's talk about Saturday. Coming up this Saturday at 10 o'clock a.m., we will be running a game on starting up. Let's go get the actual link. And trying to get to show me my page here. There it is. So start playing games is a website for hosting RPGs in a paid environment. It's a secure website and easy to log into and such. And let's see here, we're almost there. Wrong one there. Getting closer, Give me a second here. Why? Oh, why is that not working? If we're not recording, that's going to be horrible. Oh no. Oh, I'm looking in the wrong place. That's all. I was only looking in the wrong place. That's all. Alrighty. Okay. Welcome to NycosRPG. I'm Game Master Jay, or Jonathan, and I am your host. And I want to take some time in this particular episode to talk about. All right. Here we go. That was me on another channel. Very funny. Hey, there we go, Wally. Hey, Wally. I am glad to see you here. So, I was drifting on a conversation about Coinbase hijinks there when I got distracted by the fact that I wasn't seeing the video anywhere. So I apologize for that. Putting out videos like this and doing the live streaming thing is relatively new for me. So now that we're back on track, the main thing about Coinbase hijinks is to realize that sometimes people are smarter and dumber than you think they are, and when they start doing things like wanting to trade their coins from gold to silver and then from silver to platinum, there's something probably going on in their mindset that is setting up some form of weird schemes that somehow they'll have more value in the future by doing these trades. And it's silly, because as a storyteller, if I'm not tracking it, it probably doesn't exist. And so the idea of a secondary coin market is almost ludicrous. So, although I'm sure that players think of the idea of transferring gold into Electrum, if they knew the truth of history, they might think that might be a clever way to make money in the future, is to shave some gold coins. So I'll get off that rant. I do want to talk about Saturday, and I started talking about that. Saturday morning at 10 a.m., I will be running a game through the startplaying.games website. And so if you want to play, we will be playing through Discord. And although the first session, or maybe in the first few sessions, will not be aired on Twitch, I endeavor to eventually move that channel show into the Twitch environment, because I'm also working on the idea of the grand Twitch NycosRPG experiment, which I've been talking about now for almost a month, and you guys are kind of aware of it, that I endeavor to, on Saturday mornings, be on Twitch and provide playing opportunities through the Discord channel, and also through just simply chatting into the Twitch channel. And I've only had a limited amount of success with that, but that's where we'll be going in the future, and what I'm going to be endeavoring to do. So the Twitch NycosRPG experiment is timed exactly at the same time as the startplaying.games session, and it is a learn to play session, so there is no fee. So you're able to hop in, become a member of the Discord, and chat with us directly and have that conversation about the system and how to use it in whatever role-play mechanism that you're currently using, and if necessary, to show you how to operate the system solo without having to have any other system knowledge from other games or whatever. So this being Wednesday, this is the last day of the week that I actually hosted events, and that probably is why I was losing my brain earlier in this episode, because when you are a game master and you've been running a story for, in this case, as long as I have, this Wednesday group has been running for better than 2 years. The characters are creeping up rapidly on their Paragon days, and they're, sort of aging out. But then again, they are also the last scions, if you will, of the 8th iteration of Nykos, and it is when they have concluded their run, so to speak, that the 9th iteration of Nykos will truly and completely begin. Now, those of you that don't know what the H I'm talking about when I talk about iterations, let's just say that when I started playing in the 1970s, the product and the lore for what was going on in the stories was either so detailed and so demanding in terms of knowledge of the lore that it was impossible to run, or it was so difficult to locate and untenable to handle that players were simply creating their own. And thus it was with me. What I ended up, because of that, doing was I created a story arc that touched on some of the episodic things you see in the product that is manufactured for roleplay games, whether it be specifically branded modules and specifically branded information, characters, classes, etc., or it's independent, non-related, but open to use materials. And utilizing these, and then the way you link them together to make the longer story, is really what the Game Master is all about. He's supposed to be kind of chain linking what the players decide to do from week over week together to create this larger style story. And the mechanism for doing that is generally what causes the story to be either seen as a railroad or a sandbox. And with the NycosRPG experiment, what I'm trying to do is create a way that is the third rail. And the play mechanism that we used back in the day, if you will, there I got to put in my fake teeth. Talk about back in my day when things were way different. But the elements of play that are necessary are not necessarily game system related. And focusing on the game relationship with the mechanics can itself become a burden and a problem. So I did it again. See, I do this sometimes. 84. Welcome, Wally, you newbie. Yeah, I can guess that you're probably born in 1970, so that would surmise that you were, 14 or so when you learned how to play? That's cool. I started in the glory days, if you will, of it being published. I don't recall whether it was actually the fall of 74 or the spring of 75, but the books hadn't been published yet, and I had the opportunity to play with my buddy's Grandpa Dave, and Grandpa Dave happened to be Dave Arneson. Hey, Big Daddies, welcome. Nice to have you with us. This is Games Master Soapbox, and I'm now onto my non-scripted portion of the show. As you see, I've got my talking points, and I've kind of rambled through them already. If there's anything in particular you'd like to talk about, you can feel free to hop in. Well, thanks for saying that, Wally. When I did start, it was with the well-known now Dave Arneson. But at the time, he was just my buddy's Grandpa Dave. And he showed us the game on a weekend where we were going to be playing a game called Mustangs and Messerschmitts instead. But the guy with all the model airplanes didn't show up. And so Dave said, "Hey, my granddad wants to run the game. Can you mind playing it?" So that was it was interesting. At the time, I was only 11, so you can imagine that was 11-year-old sitting at a table with the rest of the group who were mostly adults. It was a war games club, after all. This was in Aurora, Colorado, at the Mission Viejo Library. Off of, I believe it was Alameda Avenue. And anyway, we were playing in one of the library's back rooms, and I distinctly remember that very first session being told about the game and kind of guided through the dice rolling to create my character. I didn't really know much about what was going on, but I was pretty precocious about listening to the way the story was told. And I remember specifically 3 elements of monsters that we ran into. The first one that we ran into were giant spiders. And I had just recently, at that point, at the age of 11, read The Hobbit. And as you may recall, there's a big fight scene between the dwarves and the giant spiders early on, and they fight to get free of them, and it's scary and dangerous and all that. So fighting against giant spiders was, for me, fairly visceral, and I'm not one to really like spiders anyway. Black widows are like my nemesis. But Jutland and Alec. Oh, here you go. That's awesome. Yeah, my go-to for crunchy games in those days was I believe it was Avalon Hill game called Victory in the Pacific. It was a sister game to a product called War at Sea, and War at Sea was Atlantic theater and really not not too dramatic because it's global domination by the Germans until the Bismarck sails, and then it all runs downhill after that for them. And so it didn't have near the power impact that the Victory in the Pacific game did, because in the Victory in the Pacific, they actually created markers for every vessel above the size of a keeper that of a cutter that was in the Navy at the time. So that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, a lot of alcohol for adults playing war games. You have to realize too that a vast majority of the grognards of that time, the term grognard actually came from the idea of drinking beer while you're playing, because the majority of people that were war gamers were people who had been in the war and understood what was going on and tried to play through and understand the complications and the difficulties of the decisions that have been made for them in the fact. So, oh yeah, I can imagine the losers having to drink. That's very funny. Yeah, the element of play that people who are war gamers are looking for in some cases is a catharsis. They're trying to play through the emotions that they might have had while they were in. I had a great uncle who was in World War II, and he fought on a aircraft carrier, and there were days that as a senior citizen where he would have these really black moods where he wouldn't be able to go out in public because he would be thinking about all the bad things that happened during the war and isolating them and bringing them into his life in the present and trying to make sense out of the angst and such. And so he would be horrible at outbursts and things like that. So we really had to help monitor and keep him from making a fool of himself in public. So yeah. Your uncles and grandfather were in Germany in World War III. Is that yesterday? I mean, aren't we in World War III right now? I mean, there are people that would argue it. We do have U.S. military advisors in places around the globe, and we have military hardware. But I probably shouldn't go into this subject. This is modern day volatile material and not necessarily tables. Yeah. So yeah, if we're yeah. No, that's fine, Wally. I thought maybe you were mistaken saying it was World War III. That's funny, but it's like the song says, it's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine, So Big Daddy Swag, I hope you're having a good day. Thanks for popping in and talking with us as well. So the element of our games environments today that I'm trying to really capture is the nuance of play that is the innocent heart trying to connect with each other. And does that mean that all my games are touchy-feely? No. Does it mean that there's not combat? No. As a matter of fact, tonight we had a final showdown. The Wednesday group has been pursuing a villain by the name of Felicia, who is a second Genesis hybrid. She's from the Foxkin. She's a fox person. She's got a fox features and human features combined in hands and can walk and all that, walk upright and all that kind of stuff. But being from the vulpine species, that is the fox species, means that she has characteristics that lend themselves to playing the role. And the element that caused her to be in opposition to the party is that she had stolen a book called The Joy of Interdimensional Spaces, which was a target book, if you recall, from one of the Dungeons and Dragons properties, and where it was in that story is not where it was in our game, but the point was that she had gotten hold of The Joy of Interdimensional Spaces and had actually built a mansion within a physical library that was extra dimensional, and was attempting to slowly steal all the books, or at least all the good ones, for her purposes. And as the players discovered this, they also discovered the value of making friends with the library and fundamentally drove her out. And they set a course for themselves 2 years ago to be at nemesis level competition with this Fullpine. And so for the first time in, I would say, close to 2 years, they got to interact with her, and the party, I'm proud to say, figured out how to put an end to her and save the universe from the bad things that she was planning. So got a Game of Thrones setting? Yeah. The trick with many kingdoms is you do end up with many political issues. And one of the biggest challenges that I found in role-playing when dealing with the politics of role-play is that it's awfully easy to add more, but it's more difficult than you can imagine to try to draw out less of what's going on in a dynamic, dramatic RPG. And therefore it becomes a self-fulfilling wheel that becomes almost impossible to control. So my basic style instead is to be theme focused and story driven, so the players can become interested in a particular concept of a story, but I don't push it to the extreme of following all of the details, because that would make me go mad as well as the players. So it makes it easier. And the element of, I think, the NycosRPG that I want to express more than anything is the idea of liberty, that the RPGs that you may be familiar with, I would say almost 100% of them have a specific graduation of personalities based on jobs, if you will. So you have terms like the tank or the warrior, or you have the word like the ranger or the damage per second person, or the buffer or debuffer, and so on. And these terms in the roleplay games kind of lose their function, because when you are speaking of a individual who is, quote, a debuffer, how does that person interact with other people in the game without having something else other than their task within the game mechanic to operate? So the reason why I feel that the story drive point is higher or more useful is because then you can actually run the changes and challenges between the characters in a homogeneous way, so that the players who have a anchor to their action take a front seat, and those that don't take a back seat while each type of scene plays out. And so the trick is to constantly have a flow of different types of scenes that bring the players to want to be participants in that. Oh, that's a fair point. That's a fair cop. The funny thing about that specific class, the Cavalier, the concept of the Cavalier doesn't exist any longer within roleplay games. As a matter of fact, I'd argue that the concept of Paladin has been eviscerated and is not the classic definition any longer either. It has morphed and adjusted to suit newer purposes that don't make any sense to the games world, so to speak. And I think it has everything to do with the class structure. Because when you say that a person must take a certain class in order to get certain skills and certain features, then you're actually channeling, driving that player to do what you want them to do, which is really the biggest argument ever made about why you don't want to play in a railroad. If you are going to do what someone has already told you you must do, that is a form of railroad. You're not playing your own better game, you're playing what they have created for you. And the creation in the Unearthed Arcana days of the Cavalier was really an attempt to amplify and expose players to a wider way of looking at the much more religious aspect of Paladin, and change the focus onto the mechanics of why a person would have those skills rather than the moral compulsion to have them. As a matter of fact, you may or may not know, but the concept of the Paladin, by definition, is not even a European nobility aspect, although it seems to play out that way in much of the world, because we have gotten so used to the idea that the knights were all chivalrous and that there were no persons who maintained the chivalric code that weren't, and that's just not the case. And that choice actually causes potentially damage to the universe. So yeah. With that, because you had to play a character. Yep. I get it. The main thing about the Cavalier is that it was an imposed order, and there is reason to have imposed order within a game session or in a game series or in a game saga, but it makes more sense if that story, that plot, if you will, of the code is actually the mechanism for roleplay. So having a person who takes an oath doesn't necessarily mean they have to study the same classes and learn the same subject. You might be as well determined to be a plow builder working on a farm someplace and be a chivalric person, good and honest and honorable and all of that, and as you would if you were, a sword-based guardian of a realm or whatever. They both can be just as pious and legalistic as the others. So oh yeah there's we can step back in the time machine anytime you want to, Wally. There's stuff that went on in the past that were golden age kind of decisions, and you've probably seen me do my little shtick where I hold my fingers up to my mouth and say, "Back in my day, things were a lot different," as I was going to spit out my teeth. But the reality is that the games environment of today is just as rich and potentially valuable as it has ever been, and perhaps even more so because it's more accepted across the board. But it's also more bankrupt, more cookie cutter, more mundane and flavorless than ever. And I believe the reason for this is that the quality of the games masters that are stepping up and running the games has dwindled considerably. And so I endeavor with my soapbox to stand up for an hour or so every night and go into why that is not the case. and such. Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, good. Good that you're introducing it. See, I have my agenda, or my way of playing it is that I have players that endeavor to be a paladin, and so I tell them that they have to create their own code, that they as a player certainly could go pick up a different code or a different series of laws from someone else, but if they did, then they would not be a paladin of whatever their character's name is. They would not be defined by that. Instead, they would be defined as a paladin of whatever that particular order, that specific ideology came to be known as. And of course, players balk at that because they want to do their own thing all the time. Nothing wrong with that. So, what I end up finding is that they usually will capture a name and then build towards the name rather than spontaneously coming up with something they want to stick with for the rest of their characters' lives. But by doing so, you end up with, for example, the idea of playing a game and setting it in a certain place and time. Then the game master has to know that history and has to share it with the players and make sure that they stay coherent with that. And instead, by having the players create their own code, you're giving the players the opportunity to understand what a code is about, and therefore you're leading them on a journey to discovery of what makes a difference to their character in terms of things in life, so that they can become the very paladin they're trying to be. So anyway, I want to thank you all for sticking with us through the hour. We are up on the end of today's episode. And if you really like what we're doing and appreciate the content, make sure you follow the channel. Click on the like button below. And I put these episodes up on NycosRPG on YouTube. So if you go over there and subscribe, I greatly appreciate that. If you want to know more and become a part of what we're doing, we do have the patreon.com/Nykos, NYCOS, like the name up here says. And when you become a member there, you get access to our Discord channel. You get information and access to the rule books for the NycosRPG, which is now available through our website. And let's see here. Just trying to follow your messages here, Wally. Oh, nice. That's really kind of a cool way to do it. To do one shots and build it that way. That is a very clever way to create a legacy. Ironically, this iteration, the 8th iteration that just is now completing, started in 2016, and for the first year, the campaign played only in one city. They didn't, even though the lore was rich and was global in terms of scope, the players never chose to pursue anything beyond their local community. And they had gotten into local politics. They were trying to corner the local guilds, the criminal guilds as well as the legal guilds. And they were involved with the local governance and all of that kind of stuff. So it was pretty crazy. And when they finally did become aware of how much they were behind on what the major storyline was, they kind of broke up and splintered into other groups, and we eventually started calling that series the Splinter of the Shards, because of the number of people pursuing different angles of the story at the same time. So it was a blast and a hoot, but it was difficult to deal with the startup because there were so many moving parts. So it's important when you are creating a new one that you start small and local, and then build out from there. So I did want to also let you know that if you join with us, then as a member of our Patreon, you can actually join and play with us on Sunday afternoons. We play from 2 o'clock until 6 o'clock p.m. on Sundays. You can also become a part of the now developing Saturday Start Playing Games series. And I will press those links down in the, see if I can do it right now. No, not yet. So I will go ahead and put it here in the Discord, the chat. That's the link to play on Saturdays. So follow that and click on it and schedule yourself a session. We will be doing new games training every week for a few weeks to get people up to speed on NycosRPG. The game is available at our website, NycosRPG.com, and you can find out more information from the patreon.com/Nykos. So thank you so much for your great attendance for today. I don't want to spend too much more of your time on this episode, and we will see you soon. Wally, thank you so much for being with us. Big Swag, your Big Daddy Swag, we thank so much for you popping in and saying hello as well. Hope to see all of you soon, and we will carry on next week and tomorrow as well. So I'm up and around all the time, so I will talk to you again soon. And congratulations on oh wow, a firefighter and a paramedic. That's some work, Wally. I honor you for that, because that's tough work, and it definitely needs to be done. And I greatly appreciate you being there wherever you are to save people like me from the bad things that we get ourselves involved with, because sometimes we do it on purpose and sometimes it just happens. But that is you're a great man, Wally. And I will talk to you again tomorrow. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments here in the chat or in the comments below. And now in the Nykos notes, you have the link to the Start Playing Games. I hope to see you on Saturdays, and I will talk to you again soon. Have a great night.